Morning, everybody. Warm welcome also from my side. I'm very happy now here to introduce the next speaker. The next speaker is Ferdi van Heerden from ReDI School of Digital Integration. We got in touch with Ferdi and maybe here Ferdi with Ferdi and the co-founder of ReDI School, Anne Richard. Who is traveling, I think, today, about 2 years ago. And we were, from the beginning, very excited that here 2 young people put aside a bit other aspirations to help young refugees to learn programming. And we immediately decided to sponsor this activity 2 years ago. And meanwhile, we are even closer. So ReDI here in Berlin is in our offices, or has a part of our offices, their headquarters, so to say, in our offices. And they had done a tremendous job in the last 2 years. So they, meanwhile, teach, I think, around 300 refugees in programming. They currently have 150 programmers. And ReDI also triggered the best headline Klöckner ever had in any newspaper. And this was when last year when Mark Zuckerberg visited Berlin and also ReDI. And then he had this discussion with the ReDI guys, and then he wanted to sponsor the first 2 courses. And then ReDI told him, look, Mark, that's really a great idea, but there is already another company sponsoring the first 2 courses. And a journalist from the Handelsblatt got aware of this, and next time we had the headline in the Handelsblatt, Zuckerberg only number 2. And Facebook, who's also a very important sponsor of ReDI, can live with this, and we are still proud. And this is now, the floor is yours now.
Thank you,
Ferdi, for your presentation.
Thanks, Gisbert. Thanks very much for that. Okay. So, hello. I appreciate that we're running a bit behind the schedule, and you've been sitting for a long time. So, I'd like everybody to stand up, please. So, if you could please stand up, that'll be great. On your agenda, it says that we are now going to talk about education for integration, and I'm going to explain a couple of the mysteries that we have around ReDI. So please raise your hand and have a look at it. So as you're looking at your hand, take a look at those individual fingerprints and imagine about the billions and billions of people on this planet who have fingerprints, but they are all different. Move your fingers. Think about the miracle of this device that you have here at the end of your arm and everything that we've created. Everything that's been created has come from these things, right? Now take a look at the person standing next to you. Appreciate that person. Take a look at that person. Notice their eyes. Notice the smile. Imagine the thoughts and the ideas that have existed in that person's mind. Imagine the history and the stories that they've had. Now, what you have all just experienced is the beauty of co-creation. Every single one of us is the product of co-creation. And I'll go into this now. If you can sit down again, maybe you feel a bit more oxygenated. So, in biology, we call co-creation sexual reproduction. So that is when 2 sets of information come together and they create something new. They create something that is different from either one of the original people that were involved or the individuals that were involved. And this is not a battle. It's not a competition, right? You don't have one set of genes going up against another set of genes in a boxing ring and the winner takes all. They come together and they work it out. They figure out something that's great. And why do we as a species use this? Because biologically there are 2 very, very important benefits of co-creation. The first one is innovation. It creates unique individuals and it allows the species to evolve and develop novelty and change. But the second one is even more important. It creates more resilient species. So we as humans are able to respond to a lot of different environments. We are able to create a lot of different new innovations because we are built on this foundation of co-creation. The opposite of this is cloning. And if you were basing, the species on cloning, every one of us would just pass our information directly onto the next person. So you'd be repeating yourself. You repeat yourself, you repeat yourself. It's very difficult to have that. And this essentially is the difference that we bring into the approach that we have with education. I think the classical education model is very much based on a mantra of repeat after me, repeat after me, repeat after me. So I believe in that model that I have the full wisdom. You have to repeat the knowledge that I have already created, and there's very little space for innovation. So that is why at ReDI we really built the entire school, our entire approach, on the principle of co-creation. And this is a dictionary definition. It talks about how different people come together to create something. But the more important line in there is jointly produce something of mutually valued outcome. Right? So that means that both parties that are involved in that see a real value in what they've done. And a lot of people talk to us and they say, oh, you've got a program for refugees. It's not just a program for refugees, it's also a program for volunteers. It's a program for companies. Because the experience that they have reframes the opportunities that they see. It reframes the way in which they work with people. So let's talk a little bit about how this co-creation works, and it starts with hello. About 2.5 years ago, my co-founder Anne had a conversation with Mohammed from Baghdad, and they essentially got talking, sharing stories, changing information, and from that an idea was born. And this idea, this conversation kept going, and this conversation led to this conversation. And we realized that technology has the unique ability to bring people together. Because what you see on this photo is not a refugee and a billionaire. What you see on this in this photo are two people passionate about virtual reality. And they are talking about their passion and about the different ways in which it can be used. They then went on to have a very detailed conversation about the benefits of Unity versus Unreal, etc. But technology allows this conversation to happen. And that is why we are called the School of Digital Integration, because we believe that that's a platform for co-creation. And it's not just that conversation that leads to new value and new ideas. All of the classes are structured in this way that there is this exchange of information. It's not a cloning, repeat after me scenario. It's a situation where people are building something together, something of value that both of them can appreciate. So we believe that through this model and focusing on creation, we created a kind of a triple win. Industry in Germany wins. There are over 50,000 unfilled positions in IT. That's at least the statistics that Bitkom will tell you. So we are helping them address a very urgent need. Society wins because we are able to have a different conversation about fringe and marginal communities that are amongst us. We are able to think about these individuals in terms of their potential and their talent, and not necessarily about the cost to the individual communities. And for the individuals that take part in our program, for a lot of them, the benefit comes in reimagining their future. So this process of co-creation is not just about learning how to do Ruby on Rails. It's about reconsidering the opportunities that you have if you are able to code. You are able to pivot in a different direction. So we've had people who studied, maybe did an MBA in Aleppo, and are now enrolled in the TU Berlin and studying a career in IT. We have people who had maybe a restaurant business, or they were in a completely different field, and they were able to reimagine their future and bring their skills into a relevant way for the digital economy in the future. And so a couple of the highlights that we've had over the last year is we started in December 2015 with a pilot. We then had our first course in February with about 42 students. That's about the time that Mark came about. But then end of last year, we saw an interesting thing where companies started taking a real interest. So we had Cisco, who've been absolute champions, and Klaus and Carsten really should get a Nobel Prize for the effort that they put into making this happen, getting a big corporation like that to sit up and take notice. But they started realizing that in working with our students and sharing their internal courses, their employees were starting to see a benefit in this as well. Because the experience that they had, the innovation, the new ideas, We did a design project with Mercedes where we reimagined the future of digital retail. And Thomas de Maizière came to have a look at this because this was something that was completely unique and different to them. So there's been a closer and closer relationship with the companies, and we're now in a situation that 2 weeks ago, our students taught the company people. So we had a workshop on co-creation, and our dear friends from Daimler, they're on that side now, came all the way from Stuttgart, and we did, I think, the first Syrian, Swabian Kaiserschmarrn. Try and say that one fast. Because we were using food as a kind of an analogy for co-creation and how we kind of bring our different perspectives together. And yeah, so we've now come full circle where our students are beginning to teach new skills for the digital economy to some of the companies out there. And as Gisbert said earlier, we're still going strong, and I think that there are a couple of things that we have become really focused on. The one is that we've noticed that specifically women require a different set of, or they have a different set of needs around the education process. So we've really focused on what are the relevant skills and what are the specific environments in which we can teach. And we also have a kids program that we've been kind of incubating for about a year now. And beginning of next year, we really want to ramp that up. So I just want to show the course catalog quickly to give you a sense of the type of topics that we are covering. So you'll see there's everything from IoT, a course that we've been running for about a year and a half now, Java, Python, etc. And it's really a broad spectrum because the first kind of mental paradigm that we run into when we talk to people and they're like, oh, you're working with refugees, is that they imagine the people to be at the lowest level of technological skill, right? Because their mind is driven by the photos that they see in the news, where they see an individual at their weakest moment, where they see them at their most vulnerable, where they see someone who's been without food for 3 or 4 days. And they think that is the total definition of this individual. But you're talking to people who've had 2 or 3 years of education, people who have a PhD. And I think that when you come into the context of technology, which is a very meritocratic society, you are evaluated on your contribution. We are able to break out of this paradigm and we are able to get into these type of conversation. And so who are the hero teachers, the people that are contributing to this co-creation? 95% of them are practitioners. So this is not a school based on academics. And I think that we heard that from the IT presentation this morning, the value of learning from people who are doing this. And there's a very important reason for us in terms of why we've made this choice. And that is quite simply that in technology, it's very often not necessarily what you know, but who you know that makes the critical difference. So if you're going to have a process of co-creation, the partner with whom you're engaging is a very critical aspect of that. And if this person has gone through the process of learning, training, and finding a job in Germany, there's a lot of soft skills and a lot of empathy that needs to be delivered with the content. So just having a catalog and just having a list of topics that we're going to do today is a very small piece of the puzzle. And that is why 95% of our teachers are practitioners from the industry. And we love data. So we have a bit of data there about how many hours we've done. But I would like you to think of these hours of classes not as delivery of content. These are co-creation opportunities. So in every one of those hours, there were people having new conversations, people reframing how they viewed themselves and their future, and building a new level of empathy for each other. And it wouldn't be possible for us to really make a difference or make an impact without an ecosystem of support. And we've mentioned that Klöckner was on board very, very early, and this is a relationship that just gets deeper and keeps growing. Cisco has launched a lab with us with quite a big donation, but the project partners are really bringing to life the day-to-day reality of what tech and what IT in Germany looks like. And this is where we are headed. Every one of our students should leave a course being able to demonstrate a skill. We made a very clear decision at the beginning of ReDI that we were not going to be about certificates and, percentages and things like that. Because if you're going to have a conversation with someone about something you're passionate, it's better to show that. It's better to experience that. You don't go into a comedy club as a stand-up and say, I've got an A+ in joke telling. It doesn't work that way. People find the reality in how you do it. And so we put a big emphasis on being able to prototype, being able to demonstrate your skills through actual contributions. And we are not just talking about the technical skills, so it's not just about the information, it's also about the soft skills. So yes, we have Christmas parties, we have a picnic, we have other parties around the demo days, because these soft skills are the things that will get you hired and integrated into the economy. So when our friends from London came over to visit the EMEA Facebook HR, we did workshops with mock interviews, with CV reviews, etc. And remember the Daimler people that we showed in the beginning? 2 days after the workshop, they came back and they taught the students interview skills. They did CV reviews with them. So there was a circular process going on where we were learning from each other and appreciating and evaluating the contribution of the other. So does it work? Yes, we believe so, because in the first instance, we are creating role models. And so we have people like Rami, who's actually working with Klöckner now and has gone on to study at the university, inspiring and drawing in people with his story. I mean, he's a 21-year-old guy. He arrived here in a bomber jacket, and a couple of months later, he was in Hamburg on stage talking about Java and his passion to become an entrepreneur. So really inspiring people. Sem, who lost his leg in Syria, and through the process of working with his prosthetic, learned about robotics and IoT and 3D printing, and is now teaching that to kids in Berlin. And we have our bureaucracy team who've actually been name-dropped by Angela Merkel, who are looking at how, from a refugee's perspective, you can change the bureaucratic process. So what happens if the innovator and the designer in that process is actually the user? One of the side consequences that we did not anticipate were the startups that came out of this. So we focus very much on using design thinking as one of the introductions to ReDI. And there's very little in this life that's as satisfying as seeing a piece of paper that was created in a workshop turning into actual businesses. And this is something that's kind of become a consequence, and these are actual companies. There's a few more like Delali, etc., who've come through the process. But this is real value that's being created through these conversations. And we are also inspiring thought leaders. So this is one of the thought leaders that came to visit and wanted to learn about the experience and the process. And we've had a number of others as well. We've had the European Commission come in and do co-creation workshops with our students. So they sat around the table and they were taking a look at how we can address specific issues. Because that's at the root of this form of education. And there's a mutual respect and dignity that leads to the dialogue. One of the interesting consequences has also been the launch of the Digitales Lerncentrum. So after Mark Zuckerberg came to visit us, we had another conversation, which is, okay, well, how do we turn this into something sustainable, something ongoing? And we worked with the team and co-created the Digitales Lerncentrum, which is now bringing IT and tech training to Silver Surfers. They're working with kids through Harbour, etc., and also taking a look at other groups in the communities who do not readily have access to IT training and education. But I think one of the best examples of the fact that this model is actually working is how the students are giving back, how our students are becoming teachers and beginning to train other people, where students are taking the curriculum, translating it, and learning to teach it to their friends in their local language. And also getting an appreciation for civil society and understanding that by making a contribution, I can accelerate the process of integration. We're very much focused on the outcome of this. I think there have been a few conversations this morning about this in terms of tracking the consequence afterward. So we follow our alumni and try and figure out where they're going. And sometimes it's quite surprising, because they might go back and study at university, doing something completely different to what they had before, or they might go on to do internships and take on jobs in the economy here. So where are we heading now? Where can you get involved and make a contribution? I think that one of the things you can think about is that we really want to put some horsepower behind the kids program. So far, we've been able to work with some local schools, and we've been able to work with other programs, but I think we don't really have a sustained, co-created solution that is really going to impact and work with these communities. So if you have some ideas about that, you can come and have a conversation. And Sophie over there, if you can see her, anybody who's from Munich, have a conversation with Sophie. She starts working on Monday in Munich. She's open to have coffees and lunches with anybody who wants to come there. We're having some launch events during November where we'll be recruiting new volunteers and students, and you are welcome to come and join us when we are down there. And with that, I'd like to say thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this. And now from people who are using the newest technology to drive integration, I think you're going to listen to people using the oldest technology after us. So thanks very much for your time. I appreciate that.